I don't have time. बस answer दे दो.
The quantum physics problem that he posed, and he was surprised that the LLM actually gave the answer to that.
When you get an answer, don't you get 10 questions in your head?
It's a trap. I feel like it's like a low productivity trap for me.
ChatGPT and any of the LLMs have that kind of behavior for complex problems. Imagine there is a rubber duck sitting in your desk. Explain your problem to that rubber duck. By the time you've explained the problem, you probably would have found the solution, because a big part of it is just verbalizing. And that habit, as opposed to just keeping it in one's head, the habit of explaining what the problem is or writing it down or whatever, seems to be a big gap. And I think, this is again a guess, that the emergence of ChatGPT and the likes of it is a big help in that regard. Earlier, people used to put in their questions in some forum. That in itself was helping. But now I have a personal assistant that I can ask the question to.
Correct. Without the fear of any judgment. I think that is the biggest bottleneck that people have. Right?
Correct. And they will be forced to learn prompt engineering, and arguably prompt engineering is nothing more than eloquent expression.
So I noticed in Anand's blog there is a specific entry around how you are making ChatGPT speak lesser and give clearer answers.
Yeah, this was basically me getting fed up with ChatGPT giving long explanation. I don't have time. Bus answer de do. Arguably, there's been a certain amount of research that's gone into when long answers help. Simple questions, short answers are fine. Complex questions, long answers help it get to the right answer. So I've recently modified the prompt to
So that's
say literally that. But yeah, the theme is this, that the way an LLM works is simply by generating the next token. And it really is doing nothing more than speak what comes into its head based on all of the training that it has. And I've noticed this for myself sometimes. After a certain amount of rambling, I kind of figure out what I want to say. And therefore, when people ramble to me, I don't stop them as much. I said, okay, let them ramble. It's basically them helping them figure out what they want to say. ChatGPT and any of the LLMs have that kind of behavior for complex problems. They need to ramble a bit. And this prompt, think step by step, does that. It gives them a structure to ramble in, so that by the end of the sequence, it's kind of gotten to where it needs to.
Just yesterday, I was discussing with an ex-classmate of mine, and his spell test question is, what is the antipode of Bali?
Okay.
And he's saying that you can't get that wrong. Otherwise, what use is ChatGPT? And for him, it gives him, I think, below the equator. So he's like, I know it can't be below the equator. It has to be slightly above the equator, so something like that. And anyway, long story short, I did that myself on ChatGPT. I phrased it in my way, and it gave what I think was the perfect answer. So hopefully I was able to convince him that maybe you were doing it either wrong, or maybe it's improved now. But for him, yeah. So it's all these near factual questions, right? I call them near factual because it's based on fact, but then there is a judgment or an understanding on, does it understand what's an antipode?
Good point.
Can it pull that out? Yeah.
I'm just doing a quick check to see what my version of ChatGPT gives and what Bard gives me. So on ChatGPT, given that I put in the custom instructions that Chow has on the screen, one of which is think step by step, it went through and said the antipode of a location is a location directly opposite to it. To find the antipode of Bali, you subtract 90 degrees if it's not.
That's what ChatGPT gave me, because I said I'm trying to understand antipodes. Now tell me what is the antipode of Bali, and it explained to me that logic. And I'll also tell you, before that, I tried Perplexity, which is also similar kind of pulling it. I just said, what is the antipode of Bali? And Perplexity gave me somewhere in Venezuela, versus with these calculations, it should be in the Atlantic off the west coast of Africa, somewhere there.
And Gemini does get it wrong to begin with. It begins by saying
Gemini would probably give it has to be in Africa because they want to make it as if it has to be a black person, right?
Well, and this is interesting all the more because I'm using Gemini Advanced, not
Right.
the basic
Okay.
one. So it begins by saying it's located in the Amazon rainforest, roughly within the borders of Brazil, Colombia, and Peru,
Right.
which again I'm guessing is in the south, which probably ought
That
not to be possible.
that's what Perplexity also gave,
Ah,
which was the basic one. But ChatGPT, once you say, then it gives you that calculation, right? That for
ah,
so many degrees south, it has to be so many degrees north, and for
ah.
the longitude, you add 180, which is actually what you want to do. That's all.
Exactly. I'm also trying it on GPT 3.5 Turbo to see what that gives. And yeah, it just says what Gemini said. It's in the Atlantic Ocean near the border of Brazil and Colombia, which arguably is not too bad. At least it's not saying it's in Brazil and Colombia.
Right.
But
Yeah.
yeah, clearly. And that is one of the observations that Ethan Mollick, one of the fairly famous personalities in the space, has been talking about. He says he's been talking to people and across different segments, both knowledgeable researchers, laymen. He finds that only about 5% of people are
Mhm.
using ChatGPT Plus or GPT-4
Right.
as
Right.
opposed to 3.5. And there is a substantial difference in quality between these
Right.
models. And a significant portion of their beliefs are things that would vanish once they go to 4. Not entirely, but significantly.
Mhm.
And this gap in itself is leading to a reasonable number of people to use LLMs less than perhaps they otherwise would.
Right. Anyway, I think that that highlights this prompt engineering. How do you pose the question? And for me, again, we were talking about how do you explain it to your team? How do you get your subordinates to actually be motivated? Uh, I think in GPT or any AI, I think that motivation will also come in a different way, not in a human way, but in a different way. You have to explain why you're doing something and give it a bit more context. Um, and to me, and this is such a recent conversation. Um, I think GPT or most of these LLMs, they are at what I classify as they're at a 10-year-old type of thing. I mean, they've reached there in like 2 years, but even
Hmm.
whether it's GPT-4, so they are learning. And there's a lot of learning that's still going on how do people ask, and sometimes they will lie because they don't know or they haven't searched hard enough, or maybe your question was unclear.
Correct.
But for a human, that 10-year-old will take 10 years to reach a 20-year-old's level of intellectual capability.
Yeah.
For an LLM, it will take probably 3 months or 6 months. So it's happening very quickly as we speak. So that's what
And
I think it's about the speed, and it's not there, but it will be there very quickly.
And the powerful thing is once it gets there, every newborn LLM will automatically be a 20-year-old at least.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
And found this really interesting. And the way you have captured the things that you mentioned about it rambling before it comes to a conclusion, right? So
Seriously.
that's something. Now that I look back at it, it's very common, but
Hmm.
you don't actually realize that till it is pointed out. So, but
No,
some of
the
these instructions are very, very useful. I mean, like do not hedge or qualify, do not waffle. I mean, being stating that upfront will really cut down on so much text that it otherwise pushes out.
correct. The one that surprised me the most and has had the most influence in my way of thinking is the last paragraph here. So I shared a common GPT Plus account with my daughter, and
Hmm.
I did a comparison of the kinds of conversations she was having versus the kind of conversation that I was having. And what I noticed was when I just look at the size of the conversations, the top five conversations by size in terms of number of words were hers. So I looked at it. She asked one question, then another question, another question. Whereas I ask a question, get the answer, move on to the next conversation, ask another question, and get the answer. So I said, look, why would you not? Why do you want to retain the context? Why do you keep asking question after question? And her response was, when you get an answer, don't you get 10 questions in your head? How can you not ask a follow up question? Which point I realized, shit, I'm old. It just does not happen. So that, and if you scroll up a little bit out to the earlier one, one of those instructions, yeah, there it is. Suggest follow-up prompts for open-ended inputs was something that I gave it as a custom instruction to help me get to that level of curiosity. And boy, oh, does this help? I probably use it only 2% of the time, in the sense that I actually follow up only 2% of the time. But it is always helpful in getting me to think.
I think, Anand, that's probably why you're able to get so much work done and write blogs and do everything, because I've realized uh, Perplexity, ChatGPT, and a few others that I keep using, that follow-up question is what traps me. Because I get so many questions, and then even though now my original question is answered, I can get on with my work because that's what I really wanted to know. But then it triggered something. Okay, why don't I find this out? And then it's an endless thought, and before I know it, 45 minutes of my life have gone. Of course, I've come out feeling less curious, or maybe more curious, because now I have even more questions to ask. But it's a trap. I feel like it's like a low productivity trap for me.
Very true.
That's
Very true.
that's how you are boosting their revenue. Also, let's remember that.
Mm-hmm. No, I only did do it in the free version. All these things with Perplexity or free version and all that. There is no token system.
Did you guys read about this? That a physicist had written a PhD thesis. So he had posed a problem in quantum physics, and then his thesis was a solution to that problem. And he worked for 4 years to come up with the solution to that problem. And the thesis wasn't published yet. So, as an experiment, he gave his the quantum physics problem that he posed, that he started his thesis with, to an LLM. And he asked the LLM, "How do you solve the problem?" And he was surprised that the LLM actually gave the answer to that. I do think that at the end of the day, we will have an objective-based AI. Objective-based AI means we'll pose a question to it. It will understand, okay, this is my objective, and then it will be able to craft the whole answer at once instead of saying, my answer is made up of the next word only. So that's how we humans do it, right? We have an objective, and then we take some milliseconds or seconds and craft an answer instead of saying every time I say a word, it's not like I'm I don't think far ahead only for the next word. I think far ahead at least for the next couple of minutes of my objective. So I do think that we'll have objective based AI instead of for the whole question itself, instead of going token by token.
Anand, I'll just add one thing. So all this discussion about prompt engineering, I knew a bit of theory 6 months ago, but it was only in December when Vix and I were online making the logo. If you see the logo on the right, this is generated from ChatGPT, and we were doing it online, and this was back in December, I think. And Vix was like really stating out the problem, and that's when I realized for the first proper time. I mean, I read about it. कि होता है अच्छा, then I was like, यार इसलिए मेरे आंसर इतने बेकार आते हैं, और ये तो बहुत ही मतलब बढ़िया लोगो बन के आ रहे हैं. मैंने भी ट्राई किया हुआ है, कुछ नहीं बनता है ऐसे. उसके and I must say कि last 2-3 months that's what I've been also realizing. Yeah, that is the thing. You just go towards that and let people develop those LLMs. You just make sure that you have the right, either it's prompt engineering or the right proprietary data which you can pull out and run your own mini or tiny LLM.